Look, it's 10 o'clock in the morning after a cold, frosty night, and I want to show you this Santalum spicatum, Western Australian Sandalwood. It's growing here in New South Wales in the Lachlan Valley, but it's quite happy and tough. This one's got privet growing over it, and the privet has given it some protection. Nevertheless, there are ones out in the open that I'll show you that can survive too. Just want to show people that you can grow Santalum spicatum in New South Wales. It's a source of valuable sandalwood oil, sandalwood timber, fragrant timber, and edible sandalwood nuts eaten by our indigenous people for thousands of years. Wonderful tree, and it can grow here in New South Wales. This is heavy clay here where I am in the Lachlan Valley. Santalum spicatum. Let's go down the field and look at the frost. So here's a young Santalum spicatum. I've got concrete bricks around it to protect it from the wallaby from nibbling it, but it's been a cold, frosty night. It was nibbled back some months back by the wallaby, but it's grown back again. But anyway, just to demonstrate to you that they're quite frost hardy once they get to a good size, I'll just walk over to the tap here. I'll walk over to this bird bath under the tap, and you can see, so what you see here is a bird bath that's been frozen. It's 10 o'clock in the morning still. 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh, and that's frozen. Oops, it was frozen. And it's all heavy clay around here. This is all heavy clay. It hasn't rained so far this winter, so the ground is as hard as a rock. So it's all heavy clay, and that's the sort of conditions that Western Australian sandalwood can survive in. This sandalwood spicatum here, it's growing under an Osage orange. It doesn't a deciduous tree, and so it's not protected. Looks a little bit miserable after the cold night. Where are you? Looks a little bit worse for wear after a frosty night, but I've got it wrapped up in concrete bricks to stop the kangaroo from nibbling it. That's quite a healthy, good tree. After this season, this tree is going to be a good size, and the kangaroo will never bother it again because it'll be too big. So it'll be able to look after itself. So this one is growing out in the open, and it wasn't protected like the other one I showed you by green privet leaves above. This one just has a deciduous tree above. It is growing under an Osage orange, but it's got a wattle tree quite nearby. There's an acacia, stenophylla growing right nearby. And it's got a huge acacia pendula growing on the other side of it. So all these acacia roots would be through the soil. Very tough acacia pendula, and it suckers, which is fantastic because that means you don't have to plant any trees, they just plant themselves. The very young sandalwoods do need some protection from kangaroos nibbling them, and also from the frost. They're delicate when they're young, aren't they? Once they start to toughen off and look leathery, this one's starting to look leathery, but it could do with a bit more sunshine really. But I can't expose it because it'll be eaten by the kangaroo. The kangaroo doesn't like to stick its mouth down inside concrete bricks like that. It got nibbled, but it'll grow back, hopefully. The biggest pest really is the kangaroo. This Santalum spicatum's out in the open, and it's alive. It's protected around the base from kangaroos, from the wallaby. The wallaby could nibble the top of that, so I pushed it in amongst those sticks, hoping that it won't touch them. This is a berberis, yes. just there. But anyway, there are acacia saligna all around this this tree. There's acacia saligna there, not far away, and there's one just behind me, just there. So they're nearby. The roots are all in the ground. The wattle roots are all in the ground. I only recently discovered this sandalwood growing here, and I was happy to find that the kangaroo didn't know it was there either. So I put bricks around it just to make sure, and it's very well protected now. It can't be nibbled down to nothing. They grow much easier than Santalum acuminatum, the quandong. I just put them in the ground and they came up on their own. Quandongs seem to be much harder to grow. These grew really easily. I've got them coming up everywhere. And as I say, they can stand the frost, so it's just well worth knowing. Of course, the tiniest one should be given some frost protection. So there could be a whole sandalwood oil and sandalwood nut industry in New South Wales, and sandalwood timber industry too. They do need a bit of summer water to be happy. They grow faster in summer if you give them water. They're good bush tucker. Of course, they need a host plant, acacia usually, I think, or some type of, is it aloe casuarina? Here's a good-sized one out in the open, out in the frosty open, after a cold, frosty night, and it's just surrounded by, immediately it's surrounded by a deciduous elm. I'll just put myself in the picture so you can see how big it is. It's surrounded by elm. It's been a cold, frosty night. It's not burnt at all, this one. I'm surprised that those kangaroos haven't got to this one. I'm surprised about that. Good healthy specimen. The biggest problem is kangaroos as far as I can see. Wallabies. Dreadful wallabies. This one's growing out in the open too. It was nibbled badly by wallabies, but it's coming back again. And it's quite tough and leathery. The frost overnight hasn't bothered it. We've had heavy frost for the last 3 nights now that freeze the bird bowls. This one nearby, this one just here was eaten right down by the wallabies. You can see that wallabies are a problem because it got nibbled down to nothing pretty much. Got nibbled right down. But I've protected it and it should come back now if it survives the winter. Well, I mean, it is going to be cold and miserable, isn't it? It is. It's going to be miserable. It's miserable at the moment, and it's a bit dark in these concrete tubes. If it could have more light, I suppose in theory I should have shade cloth or something. A dark concrete tube isn't the best because light can't get in, sunlight can't get in really. So I suppose ideally I should have something that's strong but lets the light through. The wallabies tend not to stick their little noses down into these things. They don't. That one was it eaten back? Yes, it was eaten back. It's got to try and make a comeback. And it's out in the open here under the elms too. See, deciduous elms. Of course there are wattle trees interspersed. I've got them planted all around the place. This one was nibbled by a kangaroo. It's now got several concrete bricks around it to stop the nibbling going on. And it's got some leaves alive. Ideally, of course, there should be sunlight getting down in there, and it's not. So it's not the best situation. But I don't want those kangaroos ruining everything for me. And right next to it here, there's a young wattle tree coming up. So make sure when you plant your quandongs that you've got an assortment of wattle trees that can be the host plant for your sandalwood. What's this one? This is, I think that's acacia pendula, very tough. I don't know if it's the best host, but it's a wattle tree, and there are lots of other wattle trees around anyway. Assorted wattles. And they can definitely stand the frost. Well, some quite heavy degrees of frost. I don't know if they go in on the central tablelands at places like Bathurst and Orange. This bird bath isn't so frozen because it's under a pine tree. These sandalwoods here have been nibbled and suffered a bit, but they're still alive. And they're growing under an olive tree. So one day it could be olives and sandalwood nuts for supper. Could be. Olive tree. Of course there are wattles nearby with all their roots in the ground anyway. So it's good permaculture, and it's permaculture that can be done in quite a cold climate with heavy clay soil. Of course there are microclimates all around even our garden, and some bird baths get more frozen than others. But it's what a sandalwood can stand. These sandalwoods here were grown in this big container as an experiment. They're under a privet, and the privet has obviously got its roots into the container because the water always gets sucked up so quickly when I water them. Anyhow, they're proof that you can grow sandalwood in this cold, frosty climate. In New South Wales, Western Australian Sandalwood, excuse me, Santalum spicatum. Very tough, healthy plants after a frosty night. Although this one, just to be clear, has got a canopy of privet above it. It's got a canopy of privet, Chinese privet I think it is, so that would reduce the frost a little bit. But nevertheless, it's still been a very cold night, and the bird bath just behind me has been frozen. So yes, do experiment. You can get the sandalwood spicatum, native Australian sandalwood seeds online. You can buy them online, eBay, or from bush tucker sellers. And they're a good vegetarian nut as well. Vegan nut, vegetarian nut. A beautiful timber, fragrant timber, used to make incense and sandalwood oil. Have I said enough? Can I say enough about them?